Hey everybody, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Folks are still joining, so please use this time to grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable. We'll get started in just a minute. Hi y'all. Thanks again for joining today's webinar, Lessons from Testing Marketing Tactics in an Evolving Crisis. My name is Ivan Avila, Research Associate here at Prosperity Now. Feel free to share a thought by typing into the chat box of your panel. And remember, if you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. I think I might have gotten cut off. Hello, hello, testing the audio. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So sorry about that. Looks like we'll have to do it without the webcam, at least for me, that is, but no worries. We'll go ahead and get started here. So once again, my name is Ivan Avila, Research Associate with Prosperity Now. Thanks again so much for joining today's webinar. So on the next slide, we have a couple of housekeeping items to go over. So the webinar is being recorded and you'll have access to the recording within a week's time. Please note that you're currently on mute, but feel free to share a thought or ask a question by typing into the chat box of your GoToWebinar control panel. Remember, if you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. So on the next slide here, we'll cover our agenda for today. First, we'll do a brief overview of the Smart Growth Innovation Project. Next, our hosts and presenters will walk us through lessons learned from marketing tactics in radio, social media, and display, including what tactics were tested, the findings, and the successes and challenges of implementation. We'll also have a panel discussion where we'll be able to ask questions and engage with our presenters. Finally, we'll wrap up and close out the webinar. So on the next slide, we'll share today's gracious host. So I'm joined today by my colleagues, Richard Reeve, Director of Financial Education for CCCS of the Savannah area, and Jonathan Stansel, New Programs Development Director at OnTrack WNC Financial Education and Counseling. They'll be leading us through the lessons learned sections and panel discussion. I'm also accompanied today by our wonderful presenters. First, we have Irene Bernhardt, Digital Content Strategist at Uprising. We also have Todd Capetillo, Director of Financial Empowerment at Tabor Community Services. We're also joined by Tina Anim, Program Manager at the Village Family Service Center, and Elena Johannesson, Program Director, Lutheran Social Services of Minnesota. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Capital One for making the work of this project possible. And on the next slide, I'll go over give you all a brief overview of Smart Growth. So today's conversation is being organized and hosted by the Smart Growth Innovation Cohort. So in partnership with Capital One, Prosperity Now began convening the Smart Growth Innovation Program back in 2015 to bring together nonprofit credit counseling agencies to think strategically about industry problems and to explore innovative solutions. Through a process guided by Prosperity Now, the program's many participating agencies develop solutions to the challenges faced by their clients. Agencies receive funding and technical assistance to respond to consumer challenges while learning human-centered design principles and methods. The program also aims to facilitate opportunities for collaboration and peer learning, such as today's webinar. Working together, Credit Counseling of Arkansas, TS of Chester, CCCS of the Savannah area, and OnTrack WNC Financial Education and Counseling saw an opportunity to raise consumer awareness about the dangers of sustained debt balances. They designed and tested an online diagnostic tool and agency locator with a supporting marketing campaign and ran a mini pilot at the end of 2019. At the beginning of 2020, the cohort was making meaning of the results of that pilot. Although the mini pilot successfully tested the solution, we did not see a meaningful change in clients reaching out earlier and hypothesized that the solution might be inadequate for the challenge at hand. So on the next slide, you can check out the full human-centered design project brief by checking out our brief titled The Debt Monster, How 4 Credit Counseling Agencies Use Human-Centered Design to Reach Consumers with Sustained Debt Balances, which is now available at the Prosperity Now website. So next slide, please. COVID-19 drastically changed our plans for 2020. We briefly paused our work to allow our partner agencies to transition their services online and focus on arising client needs. Once we were able to reconvene, we discussed how to shift our 2020 work so that it is timely and relevant for the larger field. The partner agencies thought there would be value in engaging the field in collaborative thinking about marketing and outreach that is sensitive to this evolving crisis. We held interviews with peers over the summer to learn about the emerging client needs, programmatic changes, and marketing and outreach responses. We held a webinar in September to debrief some of what we heard from these peers and engage the larger credit counseling field in this conversation. Our credit counseling peers were able to share some similar challenges to our partner agencies, such as shifting to remote work and how to react to the ongoing needs of clients in this new reality. Organizations also shared about their collective marketing struggles. Credit counseling agencies are using what resources are available to try and reach potential clients in need, such as radio ads and social media, but are limited due to the capacity and funding constraints. Some organizations are able to leverage community partnerships to establish legitimacy in the community and increase outreach. We also heard some ideas for future exploration, such as marketing strategies through Yelp ads, Google ad grants, and help kiosks. This curiosity to explore new strategies in marketing and outreach led to the marketing and outreach grants. In addition, the 2020 work of Smart Growth also consisted of fielding a consumer survey on the awareness and perception of credit counseling agencies and other programs and services. We'll go through some preliminary results in a few slides. On the next slide, we'll discuss the marketing outreach grants. So earlier this year, the Smart Growth Innovation Program offered mini grants to nonprofit credit counseling agencies to test a marketing or outreach tactic over the fall and share findings and lessons learned. To participate, agencies had to be small to mid-sized, regionally based credit counseling agencies with a creative marketing or outreach tactic to be tested and data collection plans. 4 agencies were selected to participate: Uprising, Tabor Community Services, the Village Family Service Center, and Lutheran Social Services of Minnesota. The learning objectives for these grants were to learn and share successes, challenges, and lessons learned of reaching clients during the COVID-19 crisis, and to support group problem solving around marketing outreach among credit counseling agencies. Each agency was able to successfully implement a marketing or outreach strategy over the course of the fall and were able to report back on findings and lessons learned. One thing to note, the testing period for these grants was very short and lasted roughly 2 to 2.5 months. The findings that you hear about today from these agencies are all preliminary. Next slide, please. So along with the exploration of the marketing and outreach strategies, the Smart Growth team also worked on developing and fielding a survey to assess the awareness and perception of credit counseling among the various financial service options available to consumers who are currently struggling with debt. In total, we were able to gather 514 survey responses. The survey was fielded in mid-November through Qualtrics. First, you'll see this table on the left that we asked folks to select out of a list of various financial programs and services, which ones had they ever heard of. The most popular product was debt consolidation, with about 50% of our sample selecting that they have heard of this service. But credit counseling wasn't too far behind at 42.6%. However, only about 18% had heard of debt management plans. Over on the right, Over on the right, you see that participants were asked about their overall perception of the programs, products, and services. Most of these are generally perceived as positive or neutral. As you can see, credit counseling and debt management plans are primarily perceived as positive or extremely positive by our sample. We thought this was interesting content to share before we dive into the conversation around the various marketing and outreach tactics. So on the next slide, we'll go over the objectives for today's call. You'll hear about the results from the 4 credit counseling agencies that tested different marketing tactics to reach new clients during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll discuss lessons learned, such as challenges and successes, and we'll consider how some of these lessons may be relevant to your agency. So, to lead us through this first set of tactics, I'll turn it over to Richard, Irene, and Todd. Guys, please go ahead and turn on your webcam and take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Yvonne. That was a great introduction and some really interesting information that you found in your research. I really appreciate you sharing that. And of course, it wouldn't be a webinar in 2020 without having some technical difficulties. So Yves, if you'll go to the next slide, please. And what we're going to talk about today, y'all, is in this portion is lessons learned from marketing, specifically radio as a tactic. Yves, next slide, please. So you might be thinking, well, radio has been around forever. How can you find innovations with radio advertising? But we found 2 organizations that were diving right in with that, and we'll hear from both of them in a second. The things to keep in mind about radio advertising that are beneficial to small nonprofits or credit counseling agencies are they are locally focused or regionally focused. The cost typically is low, and you have more control over the frequency that the listeners get to hear your message. We're going to get to compare 2 innovative pilots, one with the Spanish-speaking population and one with digital radio. And I want you all to be thinking as you're listening in on this portion of the webinar is, what can I learn from this, and how can I apply this in my own market, in my own area, and potentially marketing next year? Yves, next slide, please. So we're fortunate to have Todd from Tabor and Lancaster, PA, and Irene from Uprising, and then we'll have a quick Q&A session with them where you all can ask specific clarifying questions or things about their radio experience before we move on. So Yves, if you'll put it on the next slide. So I'm fortunate to introduce Todd from Tabor. Tabor is an amazing organization that is always innovating. They did a great job with their COVID-19 resources. If you haven't checked those out, I'd encourage you to. They have an app, do great housing work in Lancaster, PA. So without further ado, Todd, if you'll share your video and unmute yourself, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Richard. And yes, we're having a lot of things going on here with the whole COVID piece, but this was a great opportunity to be able to share and a learning experience. If we want to go to this slide, obviously it's just my information, but to the next slide. Our tactic in a nutshell, I know that Richard went over a little bit, but basically what it came down to is we do have a radio station it's literally about 3 blocks away from us, and we didn't do a lot of things with it. So we did 2 things that we wanted to look at, but we wanted to be able to reach out to this community. It's a large community within our city area and throughout the county. And we wanted to be able to reach out to the Spanish-speaking folks in our area, the Hispanic, as well as the folks that are actually Spanish speakers but are bilingual. So we wanted to be able to reach out to both of those. During this time, we're able to get a lot of resources used in this effect with ads as well as live programming. Next slide. Some of the challenges, and I'm not an advertising person. We do have a few marketing folks at Tabor Community Services, but I'm in the Financial Empowerment Center. So in my eyes, the initial response was a little bit low, but to the points that have already been brought up, we only did this for a little over 30 days actively on the radio station, and we're still seeing results starting to trickle in after the fact. So it's something that's going to be ongoing, but initially just a little bit low responses. I feel like that doing a little more pre-work, we kind of ran into this very, very quickly. I kind of find that as a challenge and also a success, that it's able to find things out, see which works better, and not have to put a lot of time and effort on the front end to find out what actually works. But I think that there's a lot of things going on with COVID that also affected the responses coming back, where people are maybe not thinking, let's go out and talk to a credit counselor or a home buying counselor about things while I can't put food on the table, or I'm having daycare issues and all these other things. Some of the successes, we definitely saw a definite increase in the responses from our live programming. We did 2 morning shows, and those 2 shows we did see a greater response than the actual ads that were being put out there. We formed a better relationship and partnership with this radio station, and we found out that some of the things that we thought we were going to have to pay for going forward may end up being free or very low cost. So if we hadn't started this, we wouldn't have actually found that information out. In the data collection, we did see a rise in folks that would show themselves as Hispanic in our system, and that was an increase that we're not sure if that was all based on this, but I would like to say that it did have an effect on it. Next slide. I know this one's pretty small, but basically what it came down to is during that month period, we had 130 targeted ads. The ads were over a minute long, so they were kind of lengthy when it comes to advertising on the radio. But the folks at the radio station thought it was best to keep all the content and not to break them down. And we had 3 different types of commercials that were put on these ads. And then what we did during the 2 live morning shows is actually kind of reinforce what's in the ads. So we took questions and answers. We had some survey pieces. We had live calls come in. And so it was a good opportunity to be able to reinforce what they may have been hearing over and over again on the radio station. They usually have about 15,000 households listening to that morning show. So doing 2 of them, we were able to reach out to about 30,000 folks within our area. Lancaster County is about 500,000, so not a huge amount, but it was something where it was a great start. it was nice to be able to have that interaction and find out what the clients were looking for with their questions. It broke down to about $1,500 for all of the ads and the actual live shows. And again, like I said, moving forward, some of those things will actually be coming down in price. Next slide. And some of the lessons learned, like I said, I felt like I went into it too quickly, and I wasn't able to uncover client needs before we actually started. I think we always kind of think, well, this is what the community is looking for, but without having that survey data, which sometimes can take a long time, wasn't sure if I was on the right page. I think some of it worked out well. Other things I think we could do better. We would change and adapt for the next round that we plan on doing. I always look at don't be afraid to fail. I think I'd rather fail small in a few little things. And when I say fail, they just weren't as a great an idea as maybe it was in my head at the time when I started and with the group. But I'd rather do that a few times than to spend a long period of time and then it ends up not working out. So we're able to be a little more agile there. Again, I think the pandemic did play into things a little bit, but I think overall it was a great experience. And I think that this process allowed us to think out of our normal avenues of advertising. We do a lot on social media, and we're looking to maybe try some new options. Next slide. And I think that's it there. And then I'll bring it back to Richard.
Great, Todd. Really appreciate your transparency and willing to share there. And the audience can start typing in questions that you have for Todd. But without further ado, I want to introduce a really great resource for everybody here to actually have Irene on, who is a digital content strategist from Uprising out of Columbus, Ohio. So I'm going to turn it over to Irene.
Thank you so much, Richard, for the introduction. It is an honor to be here. It's the first time I'm joining this Prosperity Now initiative. So thank you so much for welcoming me on board. And I am going to dive right into the tactic we use to reach a new audience. So if you can go to the next slide. So for Uprising, we decided to use Pandora radio advertising to reach a new audience to promote our debt management program. One of the main reasons why we selected Pandora radio is because we had read a stat that Pandora usage had increased. We also were aware that a lot of businesses were transitioning to a work from home model. And so we thought perhaps a lot of people are using the Pandora app while they're adjusting to a work from home setting to maintain themselves productive and efficient. So with that said, we decided on radio advertising, and our strategy was simple. We decided to run 2 ads per period, specifically in this phase of the first month. As you could see, I show there the 2 display ads we ran, and they had an audio ad to accompany it. In this first phase, both display ads obviously have the same messaging on the visual, slaying debt with custom debt options, and the audio is the same for both, but essentially it was talking about slaying debt with the custom debt plan, lower interest rates, financial hardship options. And the call to action was to either visit our website or call us for a free financial analysis and custom debt plan. So before I go into the results, our main target goal was online financial reviews. But we also were aware that a lot of users might not be able to stop what they're doing, especially if they're working, and complete an online financial review, especially since it required them to input financial information. So we created a unique call-in number, which is also referenced in that audio ad, in case they called later or they decided to call weeks later, then we knew it was as a result of the Pandora campaign. We also added in our system a referral code, once again, in case the Pandora user decided to reach out to us days or weeks after after, then the financial specialist would be able to add it on her notes that the client referenced Pandora being the referral platform. In terms of the targeting, women in general are our core demo for our debt management program, specifically 35 to 54 years of age. And so we set that as targeting, and the markets that we chose were the top 5 markets that convert into online financial review on our website. And the reason why you see initially there is because when we first launched the campaign, Pandora was very limited in terms of targeting with smaller budget brands, meaning you could only target according to gender, age, location, and genre of music. And so that's what initially we had, just those markets. And as you can see, women 35 to 54 years of age. But in the middle of the campaign, they rolled out a new feature where you could target according to interest and status. So we immediately jumped in to optimize the campaign and added some filters that were consistent with our core demo, such as car owners, home renters, etc. As you can see, they're all there for you. So in terms of the results, as you could see, both of them had a $491 budget each. The impressions, they were pretty much on par, over 27,000, and the reach was pretty much on par for both, over 26,000. Where we saw a distinct winner here was the cost per click was at $12.92 for ad A versus ad B was over $14. Some other results, we got 17 Pandora referred website visits, and month over month, our new users increased on our website, and the sessions increased 8%. No conversions at all, no online financial reviews. So that was the result, that first phase, that first month. So we took the cost per click metric and we used that as selecting ad A as a winner and choosing to continue that in the following month. So if we could go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So the next month, we ran ad A. Oh, sorry. Can you go back? There's a delay on my side, so I will go ahead. And so the next month, the next phase, we chose to run the winning ad from the previous month, and we chose to run a new ad with a new audio to have it compete against each other. And the budget for both were about 500. In that second phase, as you could see, both have about the same impression and reach rate, but we also see a winner where ad B, the cost per click was $12.19 in that phase. So what we did, since we had a few days left and some budget left, we went ahead and continued that ad B that was a winner in that second phase. We doubled the budget, and we saw that, yes, impressions and reach increased significantly, but the cost per click went up surprisingly more than double to $25.22. No conversions at this point either, very conservative website visits as a result of this as well. So the main challenge was conversions also. We didn't get any, but we were able to see that implementing Pandora's recommendation was not effective for the campaign. So this leads me to the lessons learned. If you could take it to the next slide. So the lesson learned, one of them was A/B testing is effective. We were able to see a clear winner right away, and we were able to continue that the next month. Another lesson that we learned is you don't have to spend thousands to have an effective campaign. The first 2 phases, we chose this strategy. We did it according to what we knew about our core demo. When we applied the strategy of adding more budget to one ad per Pandora's recommendation, it killed the campaign. The cost went more than double per click. And thirdly, Pandora audience is perhaps a cold audience. They didn't respond. They're not ready to respond right away, perhaps. And so the platform might be a brand awareness effort, and maybe over time with an effective strategy, maybe with A/B testing, you could have conversion results. that's yeah, that's a wrap from my side.
Thanks, Irene. That was really interesting. We do have a couple questions that have come in, and we've got time, I think, for probably one question for each of you. And Irene, since you were just on it, if you wouldn't mind just clarifying, I saw the difference in impressions and reach was about 27,000 to about 26,000. Do you mind just explaining the difference in impressions and reach, please?
Yes, a reach is the total number of listeners that we reached with the campaign, and impressions is the total number of times the display / audio ad was heard and seen. So that means a listener could have seen the ad twice. So that's why the impressions and the reach are vary there.
Great, thanks so much. And it looks like a new question just came in for Todd. Todd, did you track conversions in association with your radio campaigns?
Yeah, that's something actually I didn't say earlier, but we did actually have 2 conversions through this process. One was set for home buyer and the other one was set for credit counseling.
Great, thanks so much. And just one more quick question for you, Todd. You mentioned a 3%, I believe it was, increase. And I was just curious how many people that translates to for you and your agency.
It was actually six more clients that responded as Hispanic versus the same time period last year.
Great, thanks so much. So I lied, I'm gonna put one more question, Irene, if you're up for it. So I noticed that there were clicks, there were 38, I believe it was, website visits and 17 sessions. Do you mind clarifying that?
Absolutely. If the the Pandora user clicked on the ad and immediately exited, they didn't stay on the website, the Google Analytics wouldn't track that. They would have to engage with the website and be on there for a few minutes. And so that's why you see the variation between the clicks and the visits.
That's great. Well, those are the clarifying questions the audience had at this point, and we'll get to hear more from you all from a higher level, a bigger view when the panel discussion comes up. But I do want to turn it over, Yves, if you'll put it onto the next slide, and turn it over to a good guy, Mr. Jonathan Stansel, who's going to walk everybody through social media and ad display. So Jonathan, if you want to share your screen and unmute yourself, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard and Irene and Todd. I was confused there for a second when you said good guy. I thought I was coming up next, and I thought maybe it wasn't. So that was some lessons learned from radio. Next, we're going to hear from the Village Family Service Center and Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota. They focused on social media and display ads. So Tina and Elena, if you would turn on your cameras and join us. And when you are ready to go, Tina, with the Village Family Service Center, do your thing.
Hi, thank you for having me. The Village Family Service Center services clients in North Dakota and Minnesota through behavioral health services. And I am the program manager for the Financial Resource Center, which focuses on credit counseling. Next slide, please. So the ad that what we did for this campaign actually was to work with a digital marketing company to expand on a previous campaign that we had done that was really successful. So in Q3 of 2020, we introduced a series of Facebook ads that were supposed to be lighthearted. They were whimsical, they were funny. They included a lot of puns, and we had a lot of success with that. My favorite one being financial counseling makes common sense. Based on that, when we had this opportunity, we decided to expand on that Facebook ad campaign. And then in addition to that, introduce a Google display ad. And the thinking behind that was just to increase the performance of the Facebook ad. What we were thinking was that with the two campaigns running simultaneously, due to repetition and then familiarity, it would increase the performance of the Facebook ads. The ads were targeted at residents of North Dakota and Minnesota because that's where we are licensed to do business. And then also it was targeted to clients that would be more interested in financial planning, financial counseling, people that were struggling financially. What we did differently for this campaign compared to the previous one was for Facebook, we optimized the ads for conversions and traffic. And by that, what I mean is Facebook gives us the opportunity to tailor our ads to a certain specific set of objectives. So what we concentrated on was one for conversions, meaning that we were targeting people that if they saw the ad will right away be encouraged to respond, probably by filling out a form online or getting in touch with us. And then also the other target was to increase traffic to our website just to get people to learn more about what we have to offer in terms of financial counseling. And the ad ran from September 29th through to November 11th. Next slide. So the Google display ad was honestly fairly inexpensive. We spent $480 on that. Out of that, we had a little over 505,000 impressions. We had 1,462 clicks, giving us a click-through rate of 0.29%, and the cost per click was 33 cents. This, we had no conversions objectives with that. It was mainly meant to be a branding tool. The Facebook ad cost us about $646. We had close to 138,000 impressions for that. And then the reach was 53,785. And we had a click-through rate of 0.74%, which interestingly was lower than what we had in the previous quarter. So that came as a bit of a surprise. And the cost per click was 0.62%. One thing that we did notice that was really a big success though was that the targeting that we made for conversions turned out to be really successful. We had 104 attributed leads out of that campaign during that campaign period compared to 2 in the previous quarter. Of course, we also thought that that might have probably been a result of some misattribution by Facebook. And the reason that I say that is that we are part of a larger organization that runs other ads on Facebook. So it could be that that was also as a result of other ads that we're seeing. Just on the side though, one thing that we did notice was a perceived increase in calls to our agency during the campaign period. Our admin said that she felt like we had a lot of calls coming in. One thing that we also did during that period was we compared. So typically when clients come in to set up an appointment or they call in, one of the questions that we ask is how they heard about us, just so we can know how they were referred to us. So we did a comparison from the previous quarter to the period to see what might have led to the referrals. And we were hoping that probably what would have led to the referrals would have been the question that said that maybe they heard about us through social media or saw the ad, but surprisingly, most of it was from word of mouth. In spite of that, we came to the conclusion that it could have been word of mouth, but was to say that that word of mouth wasn't as a result of the ad that was seen on Google Display or on Facebook. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons that we learned, I guess for us, it looked more like we were comparing apples to oranges when we looked at the campaign period, comparing it to the previous one. Also, when it comes to objectives, so we changed up the objectives a bit for the Facebook campaign ad. So comparing the previous quarter to this campaign period, the results might have not given us exactly what we hoped because we had different objectives. Third quarter, historically, for the Village Family Service Center has been busier compared to the fourth quarter. So also comparing those two might have not given us an accurate picture. And of course, I do not need to say that comparing 2020 to 2019, we all know this year has been very different. So comparing those two also might have been a bit of a challenge. So like I said on the previous slide, one thing that came as a surprise was that we had a lower click-through rate with regards to the Facebook ad compared to the previous campaign. But then again, one thing that we realized in spite of that was that the Google display was fairly inexpensive, and it was a good way to increase traffic and just get general people to come to our website. We had the marketing company run some analytics for us, and one of the results that they got was comparing the new period to the previous one. We actually had a traffic increase of 1,800% of people who visited our contact us page compared to the previous campaign period. And put it in terms of numbers, so we were looking at 92 in the previous quarter compared to 1,745 visits to the contact us page. So that was really great. One thing that we also came out with for this was that, yes, the conversion objective was really great, and we might be tempted to concentrate more on that, but then we need to balance that with traffic also, because what that does is, as we're getting more people to come to the website to visit us, we will eventually get more people to retarget for the future. And that is it for me.
Okay, thank you, Tina. That's a lot of really interesting data. Thank you for sharing that, and also with helping us to interpret the data. That's what we need. Elena with LSS, you want to take us to the next 5 minutes or so?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Elena Johannesson, Program Director of our Debt Management Operations and Support with Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, and technically LSS Financial Counseling. We're a line of service of LSS of Minnesota. Next slide, please. So our marketing and outreach tactic, we wanted to focus on Facebook ads. We've been working on increasing our visibility on Facebook especially over the last year. So we determined that would be our best tactic. So we ran a strategic social media campaign, and there were 3 ads promoting our financial wellness services. And our target market were people who were facing financial challenges, ages 25 to 65 in the Duluth and Twin Cities metro areas. Each ad had a budget of $750 each. Next slide, please. So here's the first ad. This is an ad promoting our Facebook Live event, and the focus on that event was how to talk to kids and teach kids about money, so helpful practical tips for doing so. So that's the actual ad itself, just a screenshot of it. And you can see the ad results. We had 555 page views, a click-through rate of 0.45%. The cost per click was 94 cents. We reached 58,447 folks, and then there were 176,610 impressions. Next slide, please. The second ad, again, they all had the same budget of the $750. This one focused on a client testimonial. So the link went to our Sense and Sensibility blog with this testimonial, Felt Like a Lifeboat. That's the title of it. So the ad results for this one, 485 page views, the click-through rate 0.55%, the cost per click a little less, 69 cents. We reached 63,920. And then there were just under 200,000 impressions for this one. And next slide, please. And the third and final ad, we had seen slideshow features previously used from other organizations, that sort of thing. So we decided, hey, let's test it out and see if it works. So this one actually linked to our budget and debt counseling webpage. and we used that photo slideshow feature, as I mentioned, and you can see all the different photos. So each one of those were in that little slideshow. I just wanted to make sure you could see all the different photos we used. And so page views, less for this one, 276. The click-through rate, 43%. This one a bit more expensive. The cost per click was $1.42. We reached 42,904, and the impressions were just under 123,000. Next slide, please. And so the challenges, as with everybody, was kind of that short turnaround time. We needed to kind of pump these out and just get rolling on it. As part of LSS, we're lucky enough to have a marketing team to help us. We get just little chunks of their time every once in a while, because ultimately we have pretty much zero budget for marketing. So that's why this opportunity from Prosperity Now and Capital One was extremely helpful. We greatly appreciate it. One of the other challenges that other organizations are probably seeing too, due to the eviction moratoriums, forbearances for mortgages, also student loans, consumers might not be feeling that pinch, that financial pressure. So they might not be reaching out for help right now. I know that others have seen, and that's what they were testing out with the debt monster, is getting people to reach out sooner before they're in financial trouble. And so that's kind of what we're anticipating seeing is increases down the road, and maybe people aren't feeling that pinch just because there's minimal financial pressure right now for some of them, not everybody, but some. So the successes we've seen, we had a 213% increase in traffic. The ads ran from September 30th through November 12th, so that's 44 days. We had within that, as it says in there, there was one little glitch. Facebook has a spending limit that's kind of internal, and if you forget about it, it can stop your ad. So we unintentionally had one little snafu where it stopped running for one of the ads, but we caught it, and then we were able to get it rolling again. Not a big deal, but just something to keep in mind that that's there. So from the prior 44 days, again, we had that increase in traffic. The page views from August 17th through September 29th were 278. And then during that actual ad campaign were 882. So we thought that was a major success in getting more people to our website, because that was the ultimate goal of these ads, was getting people to our website, calling for appointments, or doing an online session, that sort of thing. As you can see, I'm not going to read all the different impressions and unique link clicks and that sort of thing, but you can see the total reach was the impressions, I mean, just under 500,000, and then an increase in time spent on our budget debt counseling webpage. We find that huge because that means people are actually reading. They're not just clicking on the link and leaving right away. They're finding out more about us, hopefully going to our online page and maybe doing it online or maybe calling us. Here are some of the lessons learned. The most cost-effective ad that we determined was the client testimonial ad. And that typically is usually the most successful with our blogs, also because people want to see real people and how we are able to help them. And so that was one thing that we wanted to make sure to tell everybody about. The Facebook Live event attendance, we've had those. We've been doing about one a month for the last several months prior to this particular marketing and outreach tactic. The attendance did not increase. So that was one thing that we learned, that even though we spent money on those ads, it didn't change from when we just promoted them normally and just shared, asked people to share them, or we shared them ourselves on our Facebook pages. The ads also created awareness and led to website page views, as I mentioned, which again is the ultimate goal. For us, as with Tina, we're part of a larger organization as well. So it's really difficult for us to tell how many phone calls and appointments resulted from this, because it could be LSS, Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, or LSS Financial Counseling. We both have web pages. So it's hard to say if somebody put a Facebook as a referral, not sure if this was from the ad, if it was from the LSS page, if it was from the LSS Financial Counseling page. So unfortunately, it's hard to kind of narrow that down. I'm going to jump down to the Explore. So that's one of the things that we kind of got insight with in talking with our marketing team, is we should perhaps look at updating some of our referral codes. We don't want too many, but perhaps it would behoove us to make a few more specific. Maybe it's a specific LSS Financial Counseling Facebook ad, or something to that effect. That's probably too wordy, but you get the gist. And so again, it's hard to tell how many phone calls and appointments resulted, but our expectation is that we should be seeing an increase in new appointments coming up. I can't remember who mentioned it, but this time of year also, I think it was you as well, Tina. This time of year is typically pretty quiet. We usually aren't super busy with phone calls and appointments because people are getting ready for the holidays. We'll usually see that push, an influx of folks coming in January, February. So that's why it's a little tough. I think the timing of things might be a little skewed, just obviously because of COVID, and then because of the time of year. So that's all for me.
Thank you again. I mean, again, with the data and the interpretation, which is what we need. Got some time for some clarifying questions that are coming in. I'll give Elena a minute to catch her breath and ask Tina a few. Tina, can you, let's see, where do I want to begin? How do you define a conversion? Is that somebody that fills out a form or signs up for a program or actually attends something? How did you define that?
So the conversion will be someone that fills out a form online. So they saw the ad and then they they clicked a form to access our services. Is pretty much what the conversion is. So
Okay.
Those are people that we know that they actually wanted our services, and those were people that we were targeting.
Okay. And then one more for you. Can you say a little bit more about how you targeted the Facebook ads other than geography? What were the other characteristics you were looking at?
So we were looking at people that were typically interested in financial counseling, people that were probably struggling financially or are looking at financial planning as something for the future, or just in these times, like looking to improve on their financial wellness.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm looking at 3 different places for questions here. So, Elena, you were, let's see, go with this one. You were talking about you had data for the number of impressions versus reach. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but impressions is the number of people that actually saw the ad. And forgive me if I missed it, but how is reach defined?
I might have to go back to Irene on that one. She's the specialist.
Okay.
I am not a marketing person, so I was
Okay.
honestly thinking somebody's going to ask me that question, and I'm gonna vomit. I might need to go back to Irene and defer to her on that.
Okay, fair enough. And
Happy to answer if you need me to.
Yes, please jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as echoed before, reach is the total number of people that you saw the ad, and impressions is the total number of times the ad was seen. And the reason why it's different is because the listener or the person viewing the ad could see the ad multiple times. So yeah.
Thank you.
So impressions is
how many times I
number.
hear that? I have to have somebody go over it one more time.
Me
No, it's the impressions.
What's that? Okay. Elena, how did you wrestle the client testimonial? People talk about how difficult it is to get a good client testimonial. Do you know how y'all got that?
Yep. So we actually, when we do our surveys afterwards, we send out client satisfaction surveys to everybody that we see. And so we put that on there as an option if people want to voluntarily give that. This particular one, I believe the client had been working, directly, very closely one-on-one with the counselor, and they actually had a conversation about it. And we're like, hey, you're really excited about it. Would you be willing to tell your story? And so we start off with that. We get a form signed that they're okay. They give their consent to do so, and then we kind of take it baby steps. So it's, first of all, do you want to share your name? Is a picture okay? What do you want to tell it in your own words? That sort of thing. So it's really I think we gauge it based on the excitement of that particular client. But initially it's, hey, in the survey, would you be willing to tell your story? Just starting out with that first question. If people say yes, and then we go from there.
Okay, thank you. And I got a question that I think might have come in before you shared that you didn't see an uptick in the number of people signing up for the class, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it might just be useful to know in general. So how many people attended the Teaching kids' financial literacy thing?
It was pretty minimal, and Facebook Live events are interesting because you can always go in and watch them afterwards. So I think we didn't have very many. I want to say it might have been maybe a dozen. I'm just off the top of my head guessing, because I did not write that stat down, and I apologize. But that's what we found is those live events are pretty minimally attended. We'll see a lot of clicks afterwards that people will watch them. Some maybe just for a second to see what it is, and then some might take a little bit more time and maybe not watch the whole thing. So I don't have all those stats in front of me, but yeah, I think that's a good estimate.
Okay. Well, I don't think we have any other questions rolling in unless I missed one. So as far as the in the weeds sort of questions go, interesting themes kind of coming up. Seems like there's this theme of conversions versus kind of a broader brand awareness, or and this theme of I think, Tina, maybe you both mentioned, like, how do you really know, like, tracking the effectiveness of these things is almost impossible, because you could get somebody could say word of mouth, but it was really a combination of word of mouth and that thing they just heard, or saw. But with that, thank you both. I'm going to ask you to stay on the line camera-wise, and invite Richard and Todd and Irene to come on board, and I'm going to turn it over to Richard to walk us through the last part of our discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And we're going to now step back and reflect on the things we've learned. But this is also the audience participation time. So we would love it if, Yves, if you'll put it on the next slide. I think I can share the technically how to add to the discussion or get more reflections and advice from this group who's so willing to share, and I appreciate that from everybody. So this is a group discussion, how to do it. You will see you're going to stay on mute, but we would love for you to find the chat box on the right-hand side there and type in your questions. And we have Stephanie in the back from Prosperity Now who's willing to share those out with the group. Again, if you have any technical issues, you can email GoToMeeting@Prosperity Now. But we'd love to get your questions answered from this distinguished panel. Yves, if you'll put it on the next slide, please. So just to get us started, I've got a few questions, and I love this idea from the IDEO Field Guide, Human-Centered Design. One of the things we loved from the Debt Monster project was this quote: "We don't cling to ideas any longer than we have to, because we know that we'll have more." And I think Todd brought that up as well, not being afraid to fail. So let's reflect back, and I want to start, I think, with Todd, if you'll go first, and then over to you, Irene, with the first question. Yves, if you'll pop the first question up on the there. And so you've heard from the four panelists now, and I would love to hear, Todd, you first, and then Irene, some things that stood out to you as really meaningful from this pilot project that was over such a short amount of time, this kind of fast and furious marketing effort. So let's reflect back. Go ahead, Todd. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that I really liked the whole process, but I think it was very compressed, and it was during a time where, as an organization, we've been very, very busy. This time of year is usually slower, like what some other folks have said, and because we have a rental relief program, we've been extremely busy, and so compressing this into that at the same time made me really try to narrow down the focus of what we wanted to do with this program. At first I was thinking of some more broad strokes here, but I focused primarily on credit and on home ownership. And I know that's kind of, so for some folks it's a little counterintuitive with a pandemic going on, but our highest numbers have been in home ownership and rental relief. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and you're looking at two completely extremes in the market, and both of them have been up. One a lot more than the other, but those have been our strong suits. So being able to focus on those things during the pandemic with clients, not only the Spanish-speaking folks, but also the non-Spanish-speaking folks, the English folks, and I think was a good idea. I think that we were able to shift on the fly a little bit. And I just walked away thinking, hey, you know, I think I need to do this more often. I think we kind of think, well, okay, what I've been doing works. We've been getting clients. And one of our biggest ones, I know it got brought up a few times, is word of mouth. But the problem with word of mouth when your organization does more than one thing is that if someone's telling someone else, they're going to tell them about the experience they had, and they're not going to tell them about all the other great things that we do. So that's been a real challenge. We do about 22 different programs. So that's challenging when you say, okay, well, I know about this one, and if you need this, go see Tabor. But if you want the other 21, I'm not really sure where to go. So that's been a big challenge, and I think this focused advertising allows us to be able to share that story.
That's great. Thank you, Todd. Irene, do you mind reflecting back on your, after hearing from all the cohort?
Yes, I mean, I definitely echo the same sentiment. I think across the board we have felt that people just don't feel the urgency to take action there. Perhaps it's the pandemic relief programs that have kind of buffered that urgency. So, you know, definitely I'm sensing that probably influenced the campaign a little. And one main meaningful thing that I got out of this is, again, that across the board, any kind of advertising platform, whether it's Facebook, Pinterest, Pandora, whenever we talk to their reps, they always say a big budget. You need a big budget to get great results. That's the echoing message. And as you saw, and I tried to illustrate in those 3 phases, we actually did much better with $500 a budget per ad, give or take. You know, we had better click-through rates. And I don't know if you recall, the second phase, the cost per click was $12.19 versus the prior month was $12.92. So we were bringing it down ourselves just with our own strategy of A/B testing. And then when we applied the Pandora's recommendation of doubling the campaign in that 3rd phase, the cost per click doubled. So I think that was very meaningful for us. We thought, you know what, when we did it ourselves with our own strategy, it was more effective versus what the Pandora rep said. And then another thing that was meaningful was the audio is very key with Pandora. You know, we kind of had our Facebook hats in the beginning and we were thinking of the visual, but the audio, and unfortunately we're not able to share it, but I do recommend for others to please, once you are given the presentation deck, to listen to that audio, because in the audio ad, we talk about slaying debt, with the feasible debt plan. We talk about in our second ad, distancing yourself from a debt with a custom debt plan with financial hardship options. So that was also a learning curve for us, that we were kind of thinking of the visual, but it's really the audio. And just case in point, if a Pandora user is using the app and they're driving, they're just listening to the audio, they're not looking at the visual. So we realized that was very meaningful for us, that the audio is the main media component for your campaign.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing. Yves, if you'll put up the next question I want to pose to the group, and maybe this time we could have, I don't know if Elena, you'd be willing to speak on this, and maybe Irene, if you'll speak on. So you've obviously all 4 of you been very transparent about what worked, what didn't work, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm just curious if you were, you know, advising others or to do this again. Elena, if you'll take it first, what would you have done differently, or what would you do differently in the future?
Mm-hmm. Yep, great question. So I think the main thing is maybe the time of year. Maybe we would start the ad around this time and try to plant the little seed in people's brains so that they're ready after the holidays. Because again, that's typically when we see, you know, kind of the majority of influx of folks is between January and April, you know, each year. So maybe change the time of year. Probably run the ads a little bit longer. and kind of give more time for people to call and maybe see we had a lot of impressions, but sometimes it might take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times for somebody to see it and really be like, I got to call, or I got to click on this. I need to do something about my finances and take action. And then the other piece, as I mentioned, the testimonial was the most cost-effective and just most successful ad. And so I'd probably do either multiple testimonial ads or maybe just that one, depending. We definitely wouldn't use the slideshow because that was just not very successful at all. And again, we would not use our funds for Facebook Live ad events for those like that. So.
Great. And Irene, do you mind telling us what you would do differently?
Yes, as mentioned earlier, I think I would have focused more on the audio. As I said, we had our Facebook hats on and we kept thinking, oh, we have to put together a killer display ad. And as the campaign was running and we were using Pandora, we thought, wait a minute, if we're working away, we're just hearing the audio ad and we hardly see the visual. So I think I would have spent more time with that script, perfected it, although I do think they were great ads, but I'm biased. But yeah, I think I would devote more time on the audio, and then of course just the visual, just keep it basic and not invest so much time in the design on that. And then secondly, I feel like I should have just stuck to my own strategy in that third phase, even though I had a few days left. I would have been interested to see how it would have been if I just continued running 2 ads, A/B testing them the last few days with those similar budgets to see how it performed instead of kind of going with what the Pandora rep suggested.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. So Eves, if you'll put up the third question, and I would love to throw this over to Tina, if you don't mind weighing in on this. I love this question. So if you had, so we've just heard you don't need the big budget, Tina, so we're taking the pressure off, but we would love to know from what you've learned in this shared experience, if you were given $50,000 next year for targeted marketing efforts, how would you spend it?
So let me start by saying that what we got from the grant alone was like really, really huge because we barely have anything for marketing. So with that in mind, having $50,000, first of all, I'll go crazy. But after that, after I calm down, I think one of the things that we would do is run a local TV ad. We'll run an ad locally because especially with all that's going on, people are spending more time indoors, people are watching TV more. I feel like a local TV ad will put us out there, maybe spend some more money on billboards as well, just to kind of reach a wider audience, but also reach people that we most likely around in the community that we most likely would be able to help.
Thank you. I love that. Step 1, go crazy. Step 2, figure it out. That's right. So how about anybody else that wants to weigh in? Elena, do you have thoughts on this one? Would you like to share your opinion?
Yep, we'd go crazy too, because as I mentioned, our budget is basically zero. So I mean, this was awesome, but let alone $50,000, I can't even imagine. But we've always had the dream of, we have a few testimonials here and there that are video testimonials from folks, trying to keep those a short time frame as well, because you don't want to inundate people with a 5-minute testimonial video. But it is expensive, and videographers are expensive, and so that would probably be where we'd focus our efforts, and maybe getting a handful. And I know that sounds crazy with $50,000, but a handful of testimonials via video, and then pay for some ads for them to click through to our website where you view those testimonial videos would be great, because that was also, we've had one on there for years, and it is a typically people stay on that page, they watch it, they appreciate it, and again, that ad was the most successful. So I think we'd use our money to actually get really well done testimonial videos with professionals, not just me with my camera phone.
Those are good too. Those are good too. So Irene, you want to weigh in, and then Todd, maybe you could give your 2 cents, and then we'll wrap up on this question. But Irene, do you mind sharing what you would do with that big budget? I know you said we don't need it, but what would you do with it?
Well, I would hyperventilate. I mean, when I was talking to the Pandora rep, you know, he was kind of laughing at me because I'm thinking, I was like $3,000 budget, and he's like, that's pennies. So I would definitely faint for sure. But I think I would, Facebook has been effective for us at Prizen. So obviously I would invest in Facebook advertising and Google advertising. But one thing that I've shared in the past with the colleagues here is I keep hearing stats that users on Yelp are ready to convert. And just thinking of my own experience, when I go to Yelp, it's when I'm ready to utilize that service and when I'm ready to look up for a restaurant. So I definitely would probably shift from Pandora to Yelp. And I would also invest in some PR. I think a lot of times we don't consider PR as an effective strategy, but you know, just having stories out there of clients with their testimonials and putting them out there in media, reputable articles or platforms, I should say, like Forbes, etc., would probably, you know, just give us some credibility. So I would definitely invest in PR as well. But that's pricey, so that's why we don't do it.
I said 50. I didn't add a 0 to that, right? Todd, you want to any thoughts? Do you think you guys would do it, Tabor, with 50K?
Yeah, I have to say I love all these ideas. So after I did all those, if there was any money left, and I think that we found that the live programming was really good on the radio. I'm curious to see how much it would cost for us to actually have the whole program, like have a whole program on a local radio station or multiple radio stations. I'm really intrigued with Tina. I really love the TV ad. I see TV ads about credit repair and other things in my area, and I'm always like, stop! I need to have a commercial. So I would like to combat those commercials. Like, put our commercial right after that one. All right. So yeah, I think it would be a great opportunity. I just don't know if $50,000 even goes very far with those type of ads. I have no idea.
Well, thank you all. I definitely heard some common themes in our panel discussion. One around COVID, you know, certainly Tina pointing out that 2020 and 2019 are really tough to compare. I heard that the time of year could have impacted some of the results, and I think I saw that almost universally, that usually Q4 is a little quieter. I heard the idea of A/B testing. A couple people kind of reflect on that and say that that is really an effective way to see what's working and what's not. And then we don't need a huge budget. I think that's really encouraging. And then I always think about people being so visual, but the idea that we're hearing these things and they do sink in, and you have to hear them so many times. At the beginning of this project, we had an expert speak, and he said you actually need 17 times for somebody to really get it in their brain and potentially take action, which is just daunting, right? So the idea, I heard several people talk about branding versus conversions, and it's so much easier to track a conversion, but that awareness and the goodwill out in the community, you know, how long that takes to trickle in. I heard some several people mentioned having goals with their marketing plan or their marketing campaign, which I think is a really good place to start. And then testimonials are just like gold, right? They're hard to get, and I really appreciate that did work and was effective. I heard several people say we were a small nonprofit, we don't have a marketing budget, and so I can certainly relate to that. The idea of doing local ads and regional TV ads, potentially video testimonials, Facebook and Google being effective, PR. The live radio programming, I think, was great. So that kind of summarizes some really great reflections from the group. Yves, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Eves, are you still with us? I know there's a little bit of a delay. Can you, there we go. We did that. If you'll go maybe one more slide. So as was stated, this presentation will be out and Irene's audio will be a piece of it as well. So I encourage you to listen to that. But you can see the summary slide is really great because it goes across the 4 different tactics that these organizations took, the results, and outcomes, the amount they spent versus their return, and then their primary takeaway. So make sure you're reflecting back on those things. And at this point, I just kind of want to, now that we've summarized, challenge the audience to grab a piece of scrap paper or type in, if you have your computer open, one thing that you have learned from these 4 agencies that have done this kind of like super fast trial in these different ways, and they're learning. So what's one takeaway that you have for your agency that you want to share with folks? And then one thing you want to try next year. It doesn't, this could have sparked a lot of things. Hopefully it did in your mind and your creative juices are going. So what's something you're going to try in 2021 to market your own agency in your area? So that's how I want folks to think. One thing that you learned, and then one thing you're going to do next year. And Yves, if you'll go over to the next slide. So I want to thank the 4 panelists, and really appreciate you all being transparent and reflective, and just a really great group to work with. So thank you so much. And without further ado, I want to turn it over back to Yvonne to talk about next steps and a wrap up. Hopefully we can see his smiling face. If not, it'll just be audio. Yvonne, can we see or hear you?
Hey, Richard. Yep, you can hear me, but I don't want to risk it with the video.
All right.
So
disappointment, but that's okay. Thanks, Yvonne. Over to you.
Hey, at least y'all can see my picture. There you go. That's me. That's fine. Yeah. So thanks again, Richard, and thanks again to all of our wonderful presenters. I just have a few more items to cover before we close out for the day. So Yves, can you hop it over to the next slide? Thanks. So first, you can learn more about the Smart Growth Innovation Project, including our new brief, by visiting our site on the Prosperity Now webpage. You can also hear more about the results of the Smart Growth pilot and hear directly from our agency partners on their experiences of being a part of Smart Growth by checking out our videos on the Prosperity Now YouTube page. Next slide, please. And here are other networks that you can join within the Prosperity Now community. Several of these networks have ongoing virtual conversations or webinars or listservs, so please be on the lookout for additional events from any of these networks. And lastly, on the next slide, you can take action by joining our various campaigns. For more information, visit prosperitynow.org/take-action. And that'll do it. Thanks. That's all we have for today. So thank you all for joining today's webinar. Please also don't forget to take our survey. Your feedback will help us to continue fortifying our webinars and other virtual conversations. Thanks again. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a safe and prosperous holiday season. Take care.